Welcome, everyone. Today, we have a very special guest, and I always say that, but today is probably the most special we had on this entire podcast. It's none other than Bill Danko, the author, or one of the authors of The Millionaire Next Door. This is a book that has sold over 4 million copies and really is a foundational book for many investors, many personal finance gurus, and myself and Michael Zuber are going to be spending 30 minutes with Bill today talking about all sorts of concepts and lessons and results from the research that he's been doing for many years. So with that said, let's get started. All right, everyone, we have probably the most special guest I've had all year. If you don't know him, Bill Danko and Thomas Stanley wrote a book, The Millionaire Next Door, and we're privileged to have him on today to pick his brain and just get some of his learnings that he's learned over his career and journey. So, and along with me, I have Michael Zuber, as always. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for setting this up. This was one of the books that changed my life. So this is an honor beyond honor to talk to the author of that book. So I've been looking forward to this for a while.
Yeah, and Bill, really, an introduction is not really needed, but feel free to give us an introduction.
Well, maybe if I go back to how I met Tom Stanley.
Wow.
There you go.
That might be a very good point. You know, I was a mere undergraduate student in 1973, and he was one of my professors. It was a consumer behavior class, and I got an A in the class, but he also invited me to participate in his very first study of the affluent market. So really, you talk about the roots of rock and roll.
Yeah.
There it is right there. Okay. So we did that first study and had all sorts of interesting revelations and understood what we meant by an industrial strength neighborhood and how there are people who look like they have no money but have money. And there are other people who look like they have a lot of money and have nothing. So, we got some of these, important insights in the 1970s. Well, he encouraged me to get my MBA under his direction, which I did. And then he left to go to another school, in fact, Georgia State University. And I then went to get my PhD at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, RPI. So I never really left school, is what I'm saying. Undergraduate, then the MBA, then getting the PhD, then returning back to academia was wonderful. But I like to think that one of the things my mother always told me, Bill, stay in school. And I guess I took her very literally. But anyway, it was very good. It was very, very, very good. I enjoy the research and dealing with students and serving the community. So there was nothing incompatible with any of that with my worldview. Okay, so it was in 1993. Tom called me up. We're 1,500 miles apart. I'm still in upstate New York and he's in Georgia. And he said, here's a concept, big hat, no cattle.
Exactly. I remember that quote from the book.
Yeah. So, okay, that's intriguing. Now, oh boy. So here's another research opportunity. And of course, in the meantime, I got married, have 3 kids. I now have 5 grandkids, still married. But my point is, life was in full swing. Mm-hmm. And he says, let's do another large-scale survey. And it's, again, like writing another dissertation. Mm-hmm. But what else was I going to do with all my free time, right? Mm-hmm. So we did the study in early 1990s. The book was published in 1996. And then we're off to the races, 4 million copies later. And it's changed a lot of lives. I know it's changed mine.
Yeah, I bet it has. Yeah, that's one thing I wanted to make sure I said this morning, Bill, is that book changed my life. I grew up in a household that was very consumerism. Again, when we talked briefly before we hit record, when my mother would go to the store and she would say she made money when she bought something on sale. Not that she saved money. No. My mom went the next step and said she made money, which is just kind of how I was raised. So we were raised, or I was raised, to experience spending. And when I read Millionaire Next Door, the story that really stuck out to me was Dr. North and Dr. South, because they were aspirational. They were doctors, right? They had, high incomes that someone in my, when I was in my 20s, I never thought I would have. And to see how Dr. North and Dr. South, essentially the same incomes, but lived vastly different lives and had vastly different net worths, was so eye-opening to me. You want to talk about those two cases? Because I don't think kids today appreciate it, right? The big hat, no cattle, the social media flexing. It's all the same stuff, just different vocabulary. Kids today need to read Millionaire Next Door, because their social media fakes out there today doing the same thing. And they need to read Millionaire Next Door. You need to sell 8 million copies of that book.
Yeah. Oh, man. I love this guy. Yeah. The Dr. North and Dr. South is a very good, parable, if you will. The underlying idea is something called, self-imposed economic scarcity. What's between your ears, right? Mm-hmm. Now, Dr. North was a very frugal physician. He didn't spend a lot of time searching for new cars. He would buy a good depreciated car. Mm-hmm. You can still buy a luxury car that's a couple of years old and let somebody else give you the gift of early depreciation. Mm-hmm. It makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? Yeah. On the other hand, Dr. South, good income, very flashy guy, would take a lot of time and effort to buy the latest new car. So he would spend a lot, not get the gift of depreciation, and consequently his net worth was just a fraction of what Dr. North's was. Mm-hmm. So it's really about the mindset that you bring into it. You can have a very well-paying job, but if you spend it, what do you have? You're just living on an economic treadmill.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that Dr. North and Dr. South, there's lots of great stories in the book. And again, kids today, if you haven't read it, you need to go buy it. And go buy it new. Right? Don't get a used copy. Go make it yours, mark it up, make your own notes, because every story will speak to you differently. Yeah. But living below your means is a key concept. And again, I tell you kids, this book written in the 90s doesn't use the vocabulary today of social media and flexing and being woke and all that nonsense, but it's the same stuff. You are seeing people today flex like Dr. North, who don't have jack, big hat, no cattle. And then you have people just doing work like Gary V, who are doing just fine, right? Not, working in a t-shirt like Dr. South. So thank you very much.
And there's an overarching lesson in there too. One of the things we find in our empirical research, that for every wealthy person who can actually afford one of these luxury items, there are 4 to 5 others buying the same item because they want to look wealthy.
Amazing.
And so really, here's the takeaway. You can either be wealthy or look wealthy. Okay.
Yeah, that's awesome.
In fact, this is how the book got its title, Millionaire Next Door, where you're living in a neighborhood, and it could be an ordinary neighborhood, but you have no idea what the net worth of that household is. Mm-hmm. And you say, well, how can they, do all these wonderful things? Or if they're so rich, why aren't they displaying it?
One of the key lessons I took from your book is just the amount of savings that wealthy people undertake. And on average, what you saw was around 20% of their net income is saved and likely, transferred into investments that make income. And what's interesting is that if you're not already wealthy, it takes a good amount of time to save that amount of money, that hard-earned money, and then reinvest it. So I think that's just like conditioning of that mindset over time. Yeah. You're not going to just all of a sudden start buying flashy cars if you've worked that hard to start saving that amount of money. So it's almost like if you adopt the mindset early on, you'll adjust your lifestyle and probably not be a flashy, cattleman.
Yeah. And this really cuts to the chase of the difference between inheritors versus earners. 80% of the millionaires, or just wealthy people in general, are first generation.
Mm-hmm.
And how did they get there? With a lot of perseverance. One of my favorite quotes is from Benjamin Franklin from 1758. It wasn't from Nike. They didn't invent it. There is no gain without pain.
Mm.
Franklin actually has that in his essay, which, I encourage everybody to look at. You can Google it. It's about a 3,500 word essay, and it gives some really good life lessons.
Is that the 13 principles of life? Or 13
Well,
virtues?
yeah, there's some overlap in it, but there's specifically this one essay called The Way to Wealth that he wrote in 1758 under the moniker Richard Saunders, as in Poor Richard's Almanac.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So anyway, but this idea of perseverance and doing things that, are sometimes painful to get where you want to be. Now, look, going to medical school and making a lot of money, you pay a lot of dues to get there, that's for sure. Mm-hmm. But also being a successful entrepreneur, it just doesn't happen overnight. You pay a lot of dues. Okay, so when you become the earner and you really get focused on the idea that, wait a minute, I don't want to screw this up, well, you have this problem now. If you're an inheritor of money, what do you care? Easy come, easy go, right? Mm-hmm. And in fact, we have the contrast and compare in the Millionaire Next Door of the spending habits of inheritors versus earners. And again, you can imagine those who earned it are going to be a little more frugal, and they're going to be a little more directed. And in fact, which brings us to another element of the book, about economic outpatient care.
Exactly.
What does it mean after you've made all this money? Are you going to then just let your children inherit it with no strings attached, where they're going to become profligate perhaps? Okay. This could be a real danger, couldn't it? Mm-hmm. And so there are just so many intertwined lessons within the book about your mindset of how you approach money that, and again, Doctors North and South do a very good job in illustrating many of those points.
Yeah, I want to make sure we connect your book again from the 90s with something that's very common today. In the real estate world, real estate investors are often talking about legacy wealth, right? Mm-hmm. It's a very sexy concept. They want to build this thing so they can give it on to the next generation. Folks, you need to buy the Millionaire Next Door and realize what you might be doing. Because let's just say it may not turn out the way you want it if you just give away the wealth to the next generation. Read the book. I'm not going to steal the ending, but let's just say it may not turn out well for your kids. So let's just leave it at that. Sorry.
Yeah. I did a presentation to some software engineers, but not just them, but their children were there too. And so they were very successful. This was out on the West Coast. And the whole theme was about just that. What does it mean to be an inheritor? And and I emphasized the economic outpatient care problem. And I don't think these children liked me too much. The parents
Probably
did.
not.
But that's okay. It's called tough love, right?
Exactly.
Warren Buffett is a pretty smart guy. Mm-hmm. And he says, well, what do you do with your money then, with regards to your children? He says, give them enough so that they can do anything, but not so much they can do nothing.
Yep.
Oh, I like that.
So, you don't want to give them, the lap of luxury, but you do want to make sure they get the proper education and develop a skill set.
Yeah. I mean, I imagine that if you don't have the mindset of what a dollar's value is, or just the reward of working and monetarily getting that reward, I mean, how can you really manage dollars correctly, right?
Exactly. Maybe I was fortunate in the sense, I grew up in a pretty blue collar neighborhood and background. My dad died when I was 5 years old. He was 38. And
Wow.
my widowed mother, she was a high school graduate, but the point is we had, well, love but we didn't have a lot of money. In fact, when I think about this, I wasn't until I was 10 years old realized that kids actually took vacations. I just didn't know that. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I was in the same boat. In fact, I just did a podcast yesterday about, it was more like a class session, but same thing, single mother, she worked 2 jobs. I didn't have much money, but that instilled in me at a very early age the value of the dollar and really shaped my entire journey up until today, right? I look at money a whole different way, and I do want a nice car, but it has taken me 5 years, and I still haven't got it, to even justify that small purchase. It's like I just can't, in my heart, spend that money. So it's almost a blessing to have a humble upbringing like that. So teach their own, I guess. But on that note, I do want to switch to your other book, Richer, and there's a graph, and I'll put it here in the video podcast. For you listeners on the podcast, you won't see it, so check it out. But it's based on how much does one need to feel rich. And I guess, Bill, if you want to go into that for a second, what is that all about?
Yeah. Again, based on some empirical data, when we ask people, what is your current net worth? And then a follow-up question, how much would you need in order to feel rich? Now, this is interesting. If you already have $500,000, you're actually pretty rich. And I mean, in the sense of, the median net worth in the United States is about $100,000. Okay, that's the median. And if you're at 500,000, well, you don't feel rich. Well, so it goes like this. It's a curvilinear relationship. If you have $2.5 million, you think you need 5. If you have $5 million, you think you need 8. These are pretty lofty numbers. To be in the top 10% of the net worth distribution in America, you only need about $1.5 million. And when you think to be a 1%er, I think it's right now about $11 million gets you to the bottom of that threshold of what it means to be a 1%er. Now look, if you're a billionaire, of course, you're a 1/100th of 1%er, right? But when you look at the reality of how rich you really are and how many people really don't have a fraction of your net worth, you should be very grateful for what you have. Now, I know, and it seems crazy when you say, well, how can people have, how can there be a median net worth of $100,000? Well, if you look at the distribution, you'll also see that there's a negative net worth category. There are some people who are really, really hurting.
Yep.
And this brings up a lesson from 2,500 years ago from the book of Proverbs, chapter 22, verse 7. The borrower is a slave to the lender. Okay? That rings true today. When you are in debt, you are in servitude, and you just got to keep working it off, or unless you walk away. And isn't that what's happening with a number of office buildings right now? And
yes,
office space, and just walking away from your lease.
Yeah.
What a mess we're creating here.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question. So on that curve, is there a point at which the net worth, or every dollar of additional net worth is diminishing? I mean, it's essentially it's always diminishing, but at some point, the additional dollar does not equate to an additional dollar feeling.
Yeah, the curve tends to bottom out at about $5 million, and then everything else is just, it'd be interesting to look at asking a billionaire if they have enough.
Yeah.
I would hope they could say.
Well, there are probably a lot of narcissists. To get to that level, you have to be a cutthroat person, I think.
So, well, remember the James Bond movie, The World Is Not Enough?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And, well, what is enough? I mean, when you keep it all in perspective, $5 million is plenty. Trust me. It really is.
I actually want to go to that word feeling. That's what I'd love to talk a little bit about, right? You've been looking at statistics. It's very raw numbers, right? Net worth is a number. Income is a number. Spending is a number. Yeah. So what I was hoping to ask you about, Bill, is the word feeling, right? Because we've talked about feeling rich. I love that graph. As Tom was just talking about, the marginal, plus to the additional dollar kind of bottoms out around 5 million bucks. But I want to go back to your talk about the average of, or the median at 100 grand, and then talk about being a millionaire. And then we can talk about 5 million. Because I'm wondering if feeling is defined differently as somebody whose net worth's 100 grand, then a million, then 5 million. Did you ever look at that at all?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's good to be aspirational, right? And of course, in the new book, Richer Than a Millionaire,
Yep.
we really get to that where we purposely, in our survey research, only looked at those with a net worth of $100,000 or more. And so between 100,000 and a million, we call those, well, the near millionaires or the up and comers.
Okay.
They're doing better than average, that's for sure. And then we had some bona fide, a subset of millionaires, 700 or so, in that, above $1 million. But interestingly, when we look at how happy are you, how well adjusted are you,
Yeah.
we have a scale that was developed in the psychology literature. It's called subjective well-being, SWB, and it's reliable and it's valid, and it's based on 5 statements on a 7-point scale. So you can range from a low of 5 on your answers to a high of 35. And if you score between 5 and 20, you're considered unhappy, maladjusted. If you score above that, you're considered, okay, I understand my place in the universe. I'm okay. I'm doing well. I don't have, do I have problems? Of course. Do I have sick kids? Do I have issues to deal with? Yeah. But you have an understanding that you're doing well, even if you are the near millionaire. But it's even better to be, rich and happy. Okay.
For sure.
Don't sell that short. And so what we find, those who are truly, rich and happy, or even near millionaires and happy, they tend to be very charitable people with their time and money, because they know others could benefit from them. In fact, Benjamin Franklin, in that same essay from 1758, on the way to wealth, he says, look, to really be wealthy, he says, don't depend too much on your own frugality and prudence and industry. All excellent things, but it's all blasted without a blessing from heaven. And therefore, you must be charitable to those who are in need. So we tested that. So we had the happiness, we had a large scale survey, we have the net worth component, and we find that those who are well adjusted practice the golden rule, doing unto others as you would have them do unto you. They are at peace with their soul, which is everybody wants to have peace. And so whether you're a near millionaire or a multimillionaire, giving it away is actually a good thing. And again, look at Warren Buffett. He's already taken the pledge to give away a sizable amount of his net worth.
Yep.
Well, I think if many people, get past that first, $500,000 of net worth, they'll be in a position mentally to begin to see the value of being charitable, right? I think it's a grind for a lot of people. I mean, America is fantastic if you know how to navigate the capitalism, if you know how to, market yourself and capitalize and be good with your money. It's a great society, but that's not everyone. And we're also conditioned not to think like that. So you really have to be a salmon against salmon, against the grain thinking to do that in the first place. But if you get there, I mean, yeah, that seems logical that you have so much wealth. Why not give back to your neighbor, right? So
that's exactly right, and it's the right thing to do, right?
Yep.
Yeah, Bill, I was just curious, again, going back to my love of Dr. North and Dr. South story and then tying in with Richer. I don't know if I guess this might just be an opinion because the books were written, I think, a decade or so apart. Do you think Dr. South or Dr. North was happier? Did that come across, or was it just raw numbers?
No, those are just raw numbers. We didn't have that psychological measure for them.
Mm-hmm.
But I have certainly met and interviewed a number of people
Mm-hmm.
who, again, thought their happiness would be in having new cars and
Right.
bigger houses. And, it's...
Yeah, I guess where I'm going is, does the big hat, no cattle translate to less happy? Because maybe it doesn't. Maybe they're happy. Maybe they confuse themselves and they're happier. But does big hat, no cattle equal more stress and less happy?
But see, here's the thing. There are some surveys that'll just ask you, are you happy? Yes or no. This is a reliable and valid study in the psychology literature.
Gotcha.
By Professor Ed Diener, who put it into the public domain. Okay. And I thank him for that. Because, you don't want to have to pay royalties every time you use a stamp, right?
Yeah. Good point.
So,
well, I'm guessing he has more than $500,000 in net worth.
Who, me?
Ed Diener.
Ed, yeah. Oh, I suspect. I mean, he's a kindly professor. What can I say? Now, you'd be surprised how many faculty, though. I remember a study or an analysis in the Chronicle of Higher Education that outlined just how many millionaire professors there are. I mean,
yeah, well, one of the charts in your Millionaire Next Door talked about one of the top professions for millionaires was teachers, as I recall. Isn't that true?
Well, teachers and professors, especially
educators.
research professors, I mean, just look at Stanford. I mean, they've produced a number of faculty who have, did quite well.
Yeah. One of them just became a billionaire, as I recall.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not a bad deal.
Yeah. And there's some professor in Stony Brook, a math professor who also is quite well off based on his intellectual capabilities. I like it.
Well, math, I mean, geez, I feel like every mathematician should be wealthy if interest is just a wonderful equation.
Yeah. And that's another key point for anybody. Look, one of the profiles in Richer Than a Millionaire, a guy named Dave, he lives in Tennessee, in fact, but he didn't get along with his father. But my point is, he got over that. He says, I want to make sure that my children know how to do something with their life. And he started off buying a duplex. He says, I'm going to have my next door neighbor pay my mortgage. All right. Now he has 40 units and he is the property manager, and he gets his kids involved with the painting and the drywalling and all the repairs and makes it a family enterprise. And he told me he has nothing in the stock market. It's all rental income. I get it. He's satisfied. His kids are close to him. And it's one way of starting off, start with that duplex.
Yep. And I think Zuber, you can attest to this, having owned stocks and real estate and everything else, just the tangible sight of going to your building and just seeing your building and be like, yeah, I own this. It's just, I don't know. There's something about the, like my first fourplex, it was this massive old brick building from 1903 called the Johnson. And, it was in Cleveland. And just looking at like the mammoth size of the building, there's just something like the tangible satisfaction of owning that much mass. I can't explain it beyond that, but it's so much more rewarding than owning a big stock share or something.
Yeah, right. You see it on your screen. Oh, that's how much I have.
Yep.
But this is something I can see it with my, I can touch it.
That's right.
Yeah. And as long as they keep paying their rent, you're in good shape, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Cool. Well, so Zuber, I'm going to ask him one last question, and it's going to be one that's somewhat cliche, but probably hard to come up with. So, Bill, if there was, out of all your lessons and concepts and studies and your own journey, if there was just one takeaway that the listeners would take from this conversation, what would it be?
Yeah. I was a professor of marketing for 33 years. And of course, my lessons in marketing research and teaching advertising was how to extract money from a customer and give them the product or service, right? The more I think about that, our whole society has become that, hasn't it? We're always talking about bigger, faster, better.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just saying, let's sober up. Okay. Let's think about, and maybe this pandemic is helpful in a sense of making you realize maybe I don't need 2 cars. Maybe I don't need any car. Maybe I don't need all these material trappings. And it really gets down to frugality, doesn't it?
Yep.
It's maybe I can live without all of these things. Maybe I can plant a garden in my backyard and get back to nature.
Mm-hmm.
We've always had gardens, and it's great. And the grandkids are enjoying it. They're in 4-H, and they see how things are, how the land works. Let's get back to some basic values, because I'll tell you, we've been on a reckless, when you look at 70% of the gross domestic product is based on consumer activity.
Mm-hmm.
I don't mean to damage our economy, but when you look at your own personal economy, I think we'll all be better off with less stuff and maybe having a better net worth that allows you to behave the way you want to behave.
Yep.
And hopefully you'll be behaving in a charitable way.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, a cluttered house is a cluttered mind, right? And so
you can see my office. What do you think?
Yeah, it's pretty cluttered.
That's a life well lived right there. That's a life well lived.
Right.
Those are all memories and things to actually be fond of.
Absolutely.
I just want to reiterate what we just went through. Folks that follow me on my channel know that living below my means was a key element in the trajectory and speed to financial freedom. Living on less. I will again say that if you're under 40 and you haven't read Millionaire Next Door, you need to. The vocabulary will be a little different because it wasn't written in the social media age, but I promise you, you will see the flexing and all the stuff that happens on social media every minute of every hour of every day in that book. Pay attention to Dr. North and Dr. South. That really spoke to me because it was so aspirational, the high income. It's not about income. It's about how much you spend and how you spend your time, and then tying that with richer, the feeling of happiness. Once I achieved financial freedom at the age of 45, my whole life has been about giving back. It's not about climbing any higher. It's been about giving back. So tying richer with Millionaire Next Door is a phenomenal read, 1-2 punch. Go get them.
Awesome. Bill, thanks again for your time. And, if you have another book in the works, we'll get you back on here to get some more lessons.
So. Really appreciate it. And again, don't forget.
Absolutely.
There we go. I know you'll do a graphic on that.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks, Mike.
Gentlemen, hey, it's been really wonderful. I'm glad you reached out and we're persevering because, summer got kind of busy and there's 100 emails a day and there's the Tom Staub email popping up again. So thank you.
Yep,
absolutely.
It's all good.
Have a wonderful day, gentlemen.
Gentlemen, be well. Take care.
Bye-bye.